Today, I want to talk to you about flywheel pullers. We've all been there in different situations. Sometimes this is the wrench you reach for when you really don't want to go over to your toolbox and reach for a wrench. And this, well, you've used it for a pry tool and so have I. But when it comes to flywheel pullers, there really is no substitute. I want to talk to you today a little bit about that, how they work, what to look for, how they're going to prevent damage to your crankshaft and other parts of your engine, and why you should go out and get the right flywheel puller for the bike you own. The first thing I'd like to mention is to determine what type of flywheel or rotor you have. You may have one like this where the threads are external on the flywheel, or you may have one like this where the threads are internal. In either case, you're going to have to look for the right type of puller. This one has the threads internally. That is for your external thread flywheel. This one has the threads externally. That's what you're going to need to pull off a flywheel like this or a rotor that has the threads internally. Now, whether you have an external thread like that or an internal thread such as this one, the premise is the same. When you run this bolt in, this piece right here is going to hit the end of your crank. This section is attached to the flywheel itself, and it's going to pull itself off after you run down that bolt. Same one here. This is a little bit of a better quality puller. It's got threads on both sides, so you could use it in two different applications, but it's the same way. There's a little point here on the end of it. Many times on the end of your crank, you're going to have a little hole like that where that little tip sits, and you're going to spin it in, and it's going to put pressure against the crank, and this section is going to pull your rotor or flywheel off. Here's another example of a type of puller. It's a little more old-fashioned, and what you'd be looking for is on your flywheel like this, there may be two holes that are threaded, and it's tapped in there. They're threaded, they're probably 8, maybe a 10 millimeter hole. In that situation, again, you would just take this with the same premise. It would sit on your crank, but you would have two bolts. One bolt would go here, one bolt would go here. You tighten them up against your flywheel. You'd spin this center shaft, and it would pull up the flywheel or pull it off of the crank. Here's another example of a more generic puller. This type of a puller was sold in an auto parts store, and it can be used for removing a variety of different things, not just a flywheel, external or internal, but sometimes it can be used to pull bearings and things of that nature. This happens to be a 2-jaw chuck. Sometimes they come with 3, sometimes they come with 4. The problem is many times this rotor is sitting inside your engine case, and these jaws will not be able to get behind an internal flywheel like this or internal rotor in order to get it off. So while this may be handy in some cases, it's not really that universal as you may think, and it may not work on your bike. So remember, the first thing you want to look for on your bike is, do you have an external flywheel? Do you have an internal rotor? Is it a left-hand thread or is it a right-hand thread? You may need to go online or go to your manual to figure out exactly what you have. Then go to a reputable company, VintCo is a great one, and get yourself the correct flywheel puller or internal rotor removing tool that you need for your bike.